All right, ready to dive back into Frankenstein.
Always. Where are we picking up?
Chapters 13 to 15. And let me tell you, things get intense.
Oh, yeah, those chapters are a turning point. The creature really starts to evolve, becomes way more complex.
Exactly. And his experiences, they just bring up all these huge questions about what it even means to be human. Like, what does it mean to be us?
Totally.
One of the things that really stood out to me was this contrast between, the beauty of nature and the harsh reality of human society.
Yeah. You see how the creature finds this, like, peace in nature, right?
Right.
But then every time he encounters humans, it's just brutal.
It always seems to leave him feeling so isolated and just despairing.
It's like nature is this pure, untainted kind of beauty, but human society, with all its complexities and contradictions, it's just a source of pain for him.
So true. And then there's this whole theme of knowledge and how it can be, enlightening,
Of course.
but also destructive.
Absolutely.
At first, he's just so eager to learn, like a sponge.
Right.
But as he digs deeper, especially with books like, Goli's Ruins of Empires,
Oh, yeah.
he starts to see the dark side of humanity. All the violence, the oppression.
It's not just facts he's learning, is it?
No.
It's this deep dive into the cyclical nature of power, the rise and fall of civilizations.
Yeah.
He sees how we as humans just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
It's like history just keeps repeating itself,
It makes him question if we're just inherently flawed, which is a lot to carry.
especially for someone or something that's already struggling with, who they are, where they fit in.
Definitely.
And then he finds the sorrows of Werther in the woods.
Oh, talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Right. This novel's all about despair and suicide. And the creature, he's already feeling so isolated and rejected.
And those themes resonate with him so deeply.
It's interesting because you have this creature who is becoming incredibly intelligent, capable of such deep thought.
Oh, for sure.
Yet emotionally, he's still so raw.
Yeah, almost childlike even.
Easily swayed by the emotions he encounters in these books.
Exactly.
It makes you think about the dangers of knowledge without understanding.
It's like giving someone a loaded gun without teaching them how to use it safely.
It's a good analogy.
And that tension, between all that intellectual growth and his emotional turmoil, that's at the core of what Shelley's exploring here.
So true. She seems to be saying that true knowledge, real understanding, it requires more than just facts. You need that wisdom, that compassion, to use it for good.
I completely agree.
Which actually leads perfectly into the theme of human connection. The creature wants it so desperately. He observes it constantly. But it's always denied to him.
Yeah.
I mean, his interactions with the DeLacy family, those are just so poignant.
They really are.
This loving, compassionate family, just living their lives.
Simply supporting each other.
And he's mesmerized.
Remember, he's been completely isolated this whole time, hiding, just trying to piece together what it means to be human from stolen glimpses, overheard conversations.
It's almost like he's watching through a window.
Exactly. And the DeLacy family, they're the first real example he gets to see of a healthy, functioning family.
And it just awakens this longing in him, this deep longing for connection, to belong, to be a part of something.
He wants what they have, but he can't have it.
And then he discovers Victor's journal.
Talk about a punch to the gut.
I know, it's brutal. He's been trying to figure out who he is, where he comes from, and then he finds this journal, and it just lays it all out.
And not in a good way. Victor describes him with such
Hate.
Yeah. Calling him a wretch, a monster, it just shatters any illusion the creature had about Victor, about Victor's love or acceptance.
It's like being told you're a mistake, that you should never have existed.
It's no wonder he just spirals, into despair, rage.
It's important to remember, though, that he's still so young, in a way.
In a way, yes. He might be intellectually advanced, but emotionally, he's still developing.
And that makes him so much more susceptible to those feelings of rejection, abandonment.
Absolutely. And that feeling of abandonment combined with his growing awareness of how cruel the world can be.
Yeah.
Well, it sets the stage for the darker turn the story takes. It's like all that potential for good, that spark of hope.
It's slowly being poisoned
by bitterness, resentment.
It reminds me of that line from Paradise Lost. Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell.
Oh, I see the connection.
The creature's caught in this internal battle, and the rejection he faces, it just pushes him further into that darkness.
And that parallel to Paradise Lost, it's not accidental.
Of course not.
Shelley uses it deliberately to add those layers to the creature's character. Like Adam, he's created and then abandoned by his creator.
And like Satan.
He feels that injustice, that sense of being cast out, denied the love and acceptance he craves.
It's like he's this embodiment of both the good and the bad, the innocent and the fallen.
Exactly, and that's what makes the creature so compelling, so fascinating. He's sympathetic and terrifying.
Capable of great kindness, but also
Horrific violence.
he forces us to confront this duality of human nature.
The potential for both good and evil within us all.
And that's anything but black and white. Speaking of complex characters, though,
Yes.
let's talk about Safi.
Okay, what about her?
Well, she's introduced in these chapters, and I just found her journey so fascinating, especially when you compare it to the creatures.
Okay, I'm listening. What stood out to you?
For one thing, she's a total badass. I mean, she escapes this life of oppression in Turkey, travels all alone to a foreign country, embraces a new language, a new culture. She's determined to be her own life, on her own terms.
You're right. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. It's a powerful testament to the human spirit, to resilience, the ability to overcome incredible adversity and create a new life.
Especially when you contrast that with the creature, who just seems to be giving in to despair.
He's letting those emotions consume him.
And Safi, she's faced with just as many challenges, maybe even more.
But she channels her energy differently. She keeps going.
It makes you think, what if the creature had focused more on taking action, doing something, instead of just wallowing?
It's an interesting thought, but let's not forget how isolated he is. Safi, despite everything she goes through, she finds that connection. With the DeLacy family, she becomes a part of their world, the creature. With his appearance, he's denied that.
It's true. But it is interesting how both of their journeys kind of highlight the theme of education.
Oh, how so?
Well, Safi, she embraces learning as a way to empower herself, to understand the world, to find her place in it.
But the creature?
He uses his knowledge to fuel his despair and resentment.
Like a weapon.
Right. He sees the injustice, the hypocrisy, but he doesn't use it to create change. He turns it inward.
It's poisoning him.
It's like he's missing this crucial piece, empathy. He can understand the world intellectually, but he can't connect to it emotionally.
And that lack of empathy, that's what leads him down such a dark path. It's a good place to pause, though, I think.
I agree. I think our listener needs a moment to absorb all this. So much to unpack here.
Definitely, but we'll pick back up with character analysis next time.
Sounds good to me.
So, ready to dive a little deeper into these characters, the creature and Safi?
Absolutely. I'm really curious to see how they navigate this world that seems so determined to just reject them.
Well, let's start with Safi. We learn about her upbringing, right? Her Christian mother, she instilled in her this thirst for knowledge and independence.
Which is, pretty radical for a woman in Turkey society at that time.
Oh, totally. Her mother's influence is huge. It's like she planted this seed of, I don't know, maybe rebellion in Safi, this desire to break free, to make her own destiny.
And she doesn't just dream about it. She does it. She escapes from her father, risks everything to travel to a foreign country all alone. That takes some serious guts.
It does.
It kind of makes the creatures in action all the more, frustrating. He has all this knowledge, all this intelligence.
Right.
But he just gets stuck in his own head, paralyzed by his emotions.
It's true.
Safi, though, she faces just as much adversity, but she keeps moving forward.
She's a real example of agency, that even when things are bad, we still have the power to make choices, to shape our lives.
It makes you wonder, what if the creature had done that? What if he'd focused on action instead of just wallowing?
Maybe his story would have been different. But, let's not forget how isolated he is, completely alone. Safi, she might have all these challenges, but she finds those connections. With the DeLacy family, she learns their language, their customs. She becomes a part of their world. That's something the creature can never really have.
That's true. It is interesting, though, how their journeys both highlight the theme of education. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I see that. How so?
Well, Safi, she embraces learning. She uses it to empower herself, to understand the world, and to ultimately find her place in it.
But the creature...
He uses his knowledge to fuel his despair, his resentment.
Like a weapon, we were saying that earlier.
Right. He sees the injustice, the hypocrisy of the world, but instead of using what he knows to try to change things, he turns it inward. And it just eats away at him.
It's poisoning him.
It's like he's missing that key ingredient. Empathy. He can understand the world intellectually, but he doesn't connection it emotionally.
And that lack of empathy is ultimately what leads him down this destructive path. But speaking of the creature, his whole journey, it's so tied to this question of identity. He's trying to figure out who he is, where he belongs.
Right.
And that discovery of Victor's journal, well, that's a huge turning point for him.
It's just brutal to read about yourself like that, to be called these awful things, by the person who created you.
It's the ultimate betrayal. It just shatters any hope he had of ever being accepted by Victor. And it just reinforces this idea, this feeling he has, that he's different, a monster.
Unworthy of love.
Exactly. And you can see how that fuels his anger, his resentment. I mean, Victor creates this being, this intelligent, sensitive creature, but then he just abandons him, leaves him to figure everything out on his own.
No guidance, no love.
It's a massive failure responsibility, and the consequences are devastating, not just for the creature, but for Victor too, and everyone else around them.
It's like Victor wanted to play God, but he didn't want to deal with the reality of it, what he created.
And that's the tragedy. The creature, for all his, monstrousness, he still has this capacity for good, for love, for connection. But his experiences, his isolation, and then Victor rejecting him, it pushes him towards darkness.
It makes you think about nature versus nurture, right? Is he inherently evil, or is it just how he was treated by the world?
That's a big question. And honestly, I don't think Shelley gives us a clear answer.
You're probably right.
I think that's intentional. She wants us to think about it, to see the complexity of his character, the potential for both good and evil within him, and how our actions can shape, the destinies of others.
She definitely doesn't make it easy for us, which is kind of the point, I guess.
Speaking of not making it easy, her writing.
Oh, yeah.
It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But I think we should probably talk about that more after a break.
Definitely. A lot to unpack there. It's amazing, isn't it, how much is packed into just these few chapters?
It really is. It's like a whole world. And I think that's what makes great literature, great.
Yeah, that ability to say so much with, seemingly so little. So much depth.
Absolutely.
But before we get to, big picture, I want to get your thoughts on something specific.
Okay, what is it?
The creature's decision to confront the DeLacy family. He's been watching them, learning their language, just longing for their acceptance. It's such a risky move.
Oh, it is, because up until this point, he's mostly been passive, right? Observing. But here, he's taking this huge risk. He's making himself vulnerable.
Yeah, putting it all out there, hoping they'll, accept him. And the scene is so interesting because the old man is blind, right? It adds this whole layer of dramatic irony.
Because the creature thinks that blindness will make the old man, less prejudiced.
Yeah. Less likely to judge him based on how he looks.
But of course, we know that's not how it's going to go. And it's almost hard to read, because you know his hopes are about to be crushed.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. And what makes it even more heartbreaking is how sincere he is. When he's talking to the old man about his loneliness, his desire to connect, he even calls the DeLacy family his friends.
That word, friends, it really shows how much he wants to belong. And for a minute there's that glimmer of hope. The old man, he listens with compassion. He tells the creature not to despair.
Yeah.
He even says that the hearts of men, and I'm paraphrasing here, are full of brotherly love and charity.
It's such a beautiful sentiment. And it speaks to that idea that we all have the capacity for kindness deep down.
But so often that's overshadowed by fear, by prejudice.
Which, sadly, is exactly what happens when the rest of the family comes home. Their reactions are immediate.
Fear. Horror.
Agatha faints. Safie runs away. And Felix, even Felix, who's usually so kind,
he attacks the creature.
It's just this crushing blow for the creature, and it shows how deep those prejudices run. Even someone as good as Felix, he's driven to violence when he's confronted with something he doesn't understand, something different.
It makes you think about first impressions, doesn't it? How often do we let those initial judgments, those snap decisions we make based on how someone looks, how often do those things prevent us from really seeing the person in front of us?
It's something we still struggle with today.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what makes Frankenstein so relevant, so timeless. It speaks to these universal human experiences, questions we're all still asking. Who are we? How do we treat each other? And what happens when we make the wrong choices?
It's safe to say that, that these chapters are a turning point. The creature, he's lost all hope, and he vows revenge on Victor.
It's the beginning of that downward spiral. Pain, isolation, betrayal. It just leads to more tragedy.
And it leaves us, the readers, with some pretty big questions, too.
Like, who's really responsible? Is it Victor for abandoning his creation? Or is it the creature for choosing revenge? Or is it society for pushing him to that point in the first place?
So many questions, and no easy answers.
No. And that's intentional, I think. Shelley doesn't want to give us those easy answers. She wants us to confront the complexity of it all, of human nature, to see the gray areas.
And that's what makes Frankenstein so powerful. It's not just a horror story, it's this reflection of ourselves. It makes us look at our own biases, our own fears, our own capacity for both compassion and cruelty.
I completely agree. And if our listener takes away one thing from our deep dive, I hope it's this. to question your assumptions, to look beyond appearances, and to see the humanity that connects us all, even to those we might consider monsters.
So well said. It's been amazing exploring these chapters with you.
Likewise.
Until next time, everyone, keep reading. There's so much more to uncover in Frankenstein. 525.